Welcome to another episode of Code for Thought. Right on the eve of the September equinox, I arrived in Bristol for a one-day workshop. And as if to mark the change in seasons, I left a sunny London in the morning and arrived in a very autumnal and rainy Bristol at lunchtime. The workshop I attended was called the HiddenREF Festival. And before we hear from some of the presenters, organizers and participants, I'd like to explain what's behind the term HiddenREF, what it is, and why it matters. A good place to start is probably the funding of research projects, research centers and universities, because funding decisions are largely driven by looking at the research outputs. And in almost all cases, these outputs are still in the form of publications, be that an article in a scientific journal or a scientific book. The credit usually goes to the named authors and institutions and takes into account, for instance, how many times the publication is being cited by others. This is, of course, a simplified version of research assessment. In reality, these processes can be quite complex and will differ between different countries and funding organizations. In the UK, a national research assessment is conducted by the four main funding bodies of the UK, that is Research England, the Scottish Funding Council, the Higher Education Council for Wales and the Department for Economy of Northern Ireland. The process is known as the Research Excellence Framework, or REF for short. The last of these processes was completed in 2021 and the next is due in 2028. So far so good, but here's the rub. The publication and the list of authors are often just the tip of the iceberg of the actual work a research team is involved in. Outputs such as software and data are largely invisible, and vital members of research teams, for example research software engineers, technicians, librarians, to name but a few, are often overlooked. These roles and outputs are, in other words, hidden. Enter the HiddenREF. The initiative started in 2020-2021 with a competition in parallel to the conclusion of the Research Excellence Framework assessment cycle. It tried to encourage institutions to consider a more diverse range of research outputs and research roles in their submissions to the REF. And the purpose of this workshop is to prepare for the next competition, the next HiddenREF competition that is, in 2024. Just in time to boost non-traditional roles and outputs for the official 2028 assessment deadline that I mentioned earlier. The aim is to double the contributions from currently a meager 2.5% to 5%, the so-called 5% manifesto. The festival was organized as a series of working groups and panels, and I had the chance to speak to one of the organizers, James Baker from Southampton University. James has also been there with the HiddenREF right from the beginning, which is what he talks about in this brief interview.
So I'm James Baker. I am Professor of Digital Humanities at the University of Southampton, and I am one of the HiddenREF committee.
And, of course, you've been there from the start, haven't
Yes,
you?
I have.
So the question to you really is, how did it all start?
From my perspective, it started with a meeting in the New Forest that was organised by the Software Sustainability Institute, which was about trying to get existing fellows of the Institute to think about big priorities, big picture stuff, policy things that we could do. And Simon Hetrick, suggested that we do something about the REF in the sense of trying to think about the things that aren't captured by the REF or the people who aren't recognised by it. Simon, of course, with his background with the RSE community, was really thinking about RSEs and thinking about the kind of work that they did. But from my perspective as someone who works in the computational humanities, it really struck me as important because there are many people who produce non-traditional outputs in the humanities, but particularly people in the kind of digital humanities do that quite a lot. I got involved in a little workshop in the New Forest on a day, and it kind of just gradually snowballed from there.
So when was that?
It was sometime before the pandemic. It was either late 2019 or early 2020. It's one of the two. I can't remember.
Okay, but it's not that long ago.
No.
So where did it go from there? So we had the 2019 workshop in the New Forest, and then it snowballed into what?
Well, it snowballed into a series of conversations that ended up with let's run a competition, and we decided to run the HiddenREF in parallel with the actual REF. That meant we ended up delaying ours till 2021 like the REF did themselves. But it snowballed into, well, not just we need a competition, but we need to have categories. We need to ask the community what categories they would like to submit to. We ended up defining this idea of hidden roles because the community said, well, we'd like to be able to submit people to a category like that. It sort of became something that was about a competition, and then of course became something about how to then run a competition. How do we gather people to evaluate all that kind of stuff? It snowballed to, let's run something that's in parallel to the REF to recognise other things, but then it sparked all these other conversations about, well, how do we do it the right way or the better way than the REF does it at the moment?
And how many people took, or how many institutions took part in that competition?
I genuinely have no idea. And it's one of those things where,
it's on the website, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on the website. And as a committee, we take on different roles. Ultimately. So some of us were much more embedded in the valuation process because they're people who have expertise in research evaluation, which is not one of my backgrounds. I was much more involved in some of the early planning stages and actually the competition itself, where we did the results online because we couldn't have some kind of nice gala dinner because it was still COVID. I was involved in that, helping MC that event and making sure that we helped all of those people who submitted wonderful ideas get the recognition they deserve through the ceremony.
As I mentioned earlier, Research England is one of the 4 funding bodies in the UK and plays a vital part in the Research Excellence framework. Stephen Hill, the Director of Research England, gave a keynote at the festival, and in it he highlighted the challenges of universities when submitting more diverse roles and outputs for the assessment. And in particular, Stephen highlights 3 barriers.
The three barriers to people submitting non-text, non-traditional outputs to the REF are, firstly, that people are nervous that they won't be assessed fairly. Second, that it's difficult to necessarily conclude the contribution or significance of a non-text output just from the output on its own. And thirdly, the non-traditional outputs are often authored by people who aren't academic staff, and so if there are barriers to whose outputs can be submitted, that also can act to reduce the number that are entered.
And how do you think we can overcome these barriers, and what is REF doing, or Research England in particular?
So in the REF, for many iterations of the REF, we've had the ability to include an additional statement alongside an output which gives a space where people can talk about the story and the significance of their work. So that's already there. In terms of the next REF, we're opening up authorship so that outputs produced by many different types of staff within universities can be included. And we're also giving space to explain the broader significance of research outputs, where sometimes non-traditional research outputs like software tools or data sets don't just enable research in the organisation that's produced them, but enable research worldwide in many other different groups. So we're looking to encourage that type of evidence to be presented as well.
In other keynotes, we heard that it's quite a challenge to convince universities and institutions to produce other output other than publications, that is. There's the carrot and stick approach, and one of the sticks could be a 5% threshold. This is how much you need to have at least contributing. I mean, there's the 5% manifesto from the HiddenREF.
Yeah, so I think the 5% manifesto is a very good initiative, and I'm very, very supportive of it. I think it's more of a challenge for us to have some sort of requirement like that in the REF itself, simply because of the diversity of types of research and types of research departments that there are within the system. We need, in the REF, if we pose a limit like that, it needs to be applicable to everyone. So you might imagine a physics department, say, that is made up exclusively of theoretical physicists. If we said they needed to have a certain number of data sets as part of their submission, it would be impossible for them to meet that. And you can replicate that type of effect. So I think it's quite difficult to have a hard restriction in terms of proportions of different types of outputs. But I think something like the 5% manifesto is a really fantastic tool for encouraging universities to think about the different types of outputs that they have and to consider whether they can be submitted to the REF in the future.
And one final question. Do you see universities moving in the right direction of producing output that is more diverse in future?
I think a lot of these outputs are produced already, but they're not valued sufficiently, and that's partly reflects how people submit things to the REF, partly reflects how people value the staff and the professional roles that are involved in producing those sorts of outputs. But I do see those changes coming, and I think we've heard today from Kelly Veer about the work that's been going on around the technicians professional group, and that is really bringing step change in the way universities think about their technical staff and their importance in the research endeavour. So yes, I do see change, positive change for the future.
Anyone in research knows that publications play a dominant, and many think outsized role in research evaluation. It was therefore interesting to see representatives from publishing houses attend the workshop, like for instance F1000. Many in the open science community will be familiar with F1000 research. F1000 was one of the sponsors of the event, and I had the chance to talk to Guillaume Wright, physical sciences and engineering publisher, during one of our breaks. Hi Guillaume.
Morning.
You're from F1000.
I am, yes. I'm a publisher for F1000.
So let's just quickly go through what F1000 is and how it is different to different publishers.
Well, it's different in quite a number of ways, Peter, actually. We're a born open research publisher. Everything we do is built around the idea of conforming to a lot of the aspects that you would consider typical for open research. That includes things like post-publication peer review, for example. That's a key part of what we do, as well as transparent peer review. So the idea is that we combine the speed of, say, pre-printing and being able to publish things as soon as they're deemed ready, and then obviously the rigor and the quality that's associated with peer review. It's just that we flip that as compared to the traditional model. Alongside that, we make sure that everything that's related to the peer review is all transparent. So that includes things like the reviewer names and identities, their institutions, and their comments, in fact. So everything that gets published as part of the output of peer review also gets published alongside the articles. So that's really the main component that probably differs to a lot of typical traditional publishers. Yeah. And then the other side of that is that we embrace a lot of the aspects of open research that maybe a lot of people are very familiar with. So those are namely open data, for example, open software, open methods, basically any of the components that you would typically use to perform or undertake research that might underpin the results of a paper. We want authors to make as much of that possible. And again, the idea there is that it improves that transparency, it improves the trust, I guess, the robustness of the research, and that it can be built upon.
So you can publish then the software and the data as well. Is that the idea? So how do you do that then?
Exactly, yeah. We don't publish the underlying software and data itself. We ask authors to make those things available in community or subject focused repositories. So those would be typical to a lot of people that I'm sure listen to this, things like GitHub and so on. So as long as they're made available, they're made under as liberal a license as possible, basically, so it doesn't restrict any reuse of it. Then within the end articles that we publish, of which we have a real variety, a diversity of articles that we offer, including things like what you'd call non-traditional article types. Something like a software tool, for example, is one of our article types. A data note, for example. Within the article themselves, there'll be a statement somewhere that will describe the availability of the underlying aspects, including the data, for example. So that will point them to the DOI or the PID or whatever it is that allows you to access that. So anyone coming to the site should be able to find all of those underlying aspects of the research, whether it's the article itself or whether it's pointing out to a different repository or a different place.
So we're here at the HiddenREF Festival today. HiddenREF is actually trying to get away from the typical publication mode in terms of evaluating research. Yeah. But here you are as a publisher.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, in plain sight as well, yeah. The main thing really is that we feel like HiddenREF and F1000 or a publisher like F1000, they share a lot of values. HiddenREF really all being about trying to provide visibility and transparency to things that don't have it normally or typically through traditional ways of understanding research assessment and scholarly communication. And the other part of it, of course, is the accreditation of those things. So again, you've got a lot of people involved in research, in research infrastructure and so on that don't receive the same type of credit, let's say, as others. So, and that's of course, absolutely crucial to what HiddenREF is about. So I guess those aspects, that a lot of the values that the publishing company encompass as well, because we're all about that transparency and that credit. So I mean, just to give you a couple of solid examples, I've already mentioned it. So we do have different article types that I would refer to as non-traditional. The idea being that we're trying to place as much value and emphasis on those as you would do on a traditional article. So hopefully in the long term, you might see more non-traditional research staff, for example, publishing those non-traditional articles that might then end up in something like a REF exercise, for example. So we facilitate that type of placing greater emphasis or value on those sorts of output. And the other thing that we do as well is we offer the opportunity to publish non-peer-reviewed material as well. So typically training materials, guidance, standards, all this type of stuff that again is central to what people do within research. But again, it doesn't really get that value associated with it, or even the recognition in the in the wider industry. So again, we offer the opportunity to publish a lot of that stuff and make sure that it's transparently available. It's all given a DOI and therefore indexed. It's very discoverable. And the other one is trying to align with more progressive industry standards that we're looking at now with regards to recognition, like credit, for example, the credit taxonomy. Again, that taxonomy, I'm sure lots of people are familiar with it, but it assigns non-traditional roles to research producing staff and researchers and so on. We insist on that being used for anyone who's publishing with us, basically, so they list out what their role was. And again, the whole idea then is it can reveal the hidden roles that sit underneath those top layer of people that typically get credited with research. So I guess practical terms, those are the couple of things that we do. And then just finally, we have a lot of partners as well. So we partner with funders, we partner with institutions and other organisations such as learned societies to publish their own platforms, essentially, if they wish to make a move into open science and open research. Again, it's just a kind of another way that we try and work with the community hand in hand to try and basically improve things with regards to that. And I feel a lot of that is mirrored in what the HiddenREF is all about.
Another publishing house sponsoring HiddenREF is Emerald Publishing, represented by Tony Roche. And in addition to being the Chief Officer for Publishing and Strategic Relationships, Tony also happens to be a member of the HiddenREF committee, and here he talks about his contribution to the HiddenREF. Hi Tony, before we start, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself.
My name is Tony Roche and I'm the Chief Officer for Publishing and Strategic Relationships with Emerald Publishing.
And what does Emerald Publishing do, and why are you here at HiddenREF?
We are an international mission-driven social sciences publisher based originally out of the UK, founded by management scholars. Why am I here? Well, I'm one of the committee of the HiddenREF, and I also chaired the communicative outputs of the previous competition. So we're really here because we're committed to supporting the diversification across research in terms of the recognition of many, many roles who basically underpin the success of those who publish the research. And we're also keen to support researchers in telling their story in new and more diverse ways.
So how does Emerald Publishing then support these different stories?
If we look at publishing through a very traditional lens, then in many ways it's been very predictable and there hasn't been a great deal of innovation. In fact, publishers over many years have tried to experiment with video and new formats. One of the challenges, I think, and one of the reasons that we have the HiddenREF is that we really want to support not just the researchers but others to tell the story of research in new formats. And what we hope is that through some change in the ecosystem, through some culture shift and through broader evaluation of the research, we can really bring through those new formats because researchers need to be incentivized to do it.
They're not sending it in, the different material, to the REF, are they?
No, that's right. And of course we're going now into the new REF cycle.
Yes.
And so the opportunity is here through things like the festival to start to bring together more of a movement to drive this positive change. I think Research England, UKRI are actually genuinely keen to see more diversity and more roles recognised, but the institutions, the HEIs, also need to get behind that. And that's a challenge for them because they are, at the end of the day, also competing with one another, competing for research funding, and they see proven approaches, but those proven approaches need to be a bit more progressive, and they need to take risks, and they need to support their stakeholders, their faculty and others in trying new things out. So that's what we're trying to develop and drive here today.
One of the workshops run at the event covered the different types of roles in research and research teams. Meet Emma Karoum from the Alan Turing Institute in London, who was the co-organizer of this workshop and is indeed a new addition to the HiddenREF committee, as she explains to us in this interview. It was also the first time that Emma and I met in person, largely because of the pandemic, which is in fact something we come back to later when I talk to Simon Hedrick. Hi Emma.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Nice to meet you in person because so far we've only managed to see each other online.
Online in SSI meetings,
In SSI meetings, exactly. And here you are at the HiddenREF Festival.
Yes.
Running a workshop on
recognising hidden roles, because it's one of the categories of the HiddenREF competition, and it's also something that I'm very passionate about, being, I suppose, one of the hidden roles myself as a research community manager.
At the Alan Turing.
At Alan Turing Institute, yes. We are trying to do a similar thing in professionalising it is what we're calling it, professionalising research infrastructure roles. So we're investing our time very heavily in working with lots of different organisations and doing different conferences and projects to really drive forward all different research infrastructure roles.
There's one thing that struck home when I attended the workshop, and that was teams, and that we're moving more towards a team-based science rather than individual, because at the moment it's still geared up for the PI.
Yeah,
so
it can be the case. I mean, I am very lucky the way that the Turing has been set up is that we work in these large teams, and that's how we take on data science project. We're set up to have core staff like project managers, research community managers, research application managers that work alongside the kind of domain expert data scientists, research software engineers. It's kind of set up to be a team science approach. And in that sense, that's the way we also publish our research. We often have a very inclusive authorship approach. And that means that some of our papers can be 100 authors. And that's because those are the people that have actually contributed to the project. That can be very complex to manage, but it's including everyone that wants to be on the authorship. And actually, it's a reflection of who has actually done the research. So it can be people like on advisory boards. It can be things like clinicians that have inputted into looking at technicians as well, all the research engineers that we have as well, and anyone on the team that really wants to be credited in the authorship. On a lot of our projects we make that happen, and I think that's a brilliant approach to have, really.
It's a little bit like cinema. In actual fact, the reason I mentioned this is because somebody mentioned this earlier today. In cinemas and films, you get this long credit
the
at
credits,
the end, which includes everybody, because ultimately, without any of them, none of that would have happened.
So we've actually had a project at the Turing. So we have the credit system. I think it's called credit contribution system. That's used by many journals, where you can actually identify the different parts of the project that each of the authors has actually contributed. We had a project called the Living with Machines project at the Turing. They actually developed a film-like looking credit system on the front of their paper. And it looked like you're just describing like the credits of a film, and it was put on front of their paper. If you go and look for that project, it's on their website. They've got a blog about why they've done that and how it's more transparent at the different roles that people had in the project, because it was a very interdisciplinary project.
The REF does recognize a number of different roles now, but there are a few roles that are not being recognized.
Well, I think now the next one, it's going to be opened up to other people contributing. So I think that's a huge step forward, that now anybody who has an output that qualifies could author of an output. So that could be a diverse type of output, like a data set. They could actually be part of the REF. So I think that is a huge step forward.
So you're a committee member of HiddenREF, aren't
That's
you?
That's right, yes,
Since when?
A new one.
And you're a new one,
Yeah,
actually.
because when I did a workshop for the Turing Way at the Collaborations workshop this year, and it was along the same lines as this about research infrastructure roles. So Simon was like, oh, Emma, come along and meet me and we'll have a chat about this. And he was like, I'm looking for someone to help with the festival. I'm looking for this. And he's like, would you actually like to be a committee member? Because you're really fit in, like the project you're doing really fits in with our whole ethos. And I was like, oh, it sounds like a good idea. But I have to say, I've loved the HiddenREF from the beginning. And I actually was the person who submitted our applications from the Turing Way, because I was like, oh, we really fit into this. We really must support it. So I wanted to do applications, because the first time you run a competition, you're not sure how many applications there's going to be, are you? So I wanted to make sure that we had done our bit to support it and put in applications. So we were actually highly commended in the first competition as an educational resource, which I was really proud of. So we got a lovely certificate in a lovely frame that we were sent, and it's sitting in the kitchen of the Turing. So if you go into the Alan Turing Institute, the first thing you see is the reception, then you see our lovely kitchen and coffee machine, which is quite famous at the Turing, and then you see the HiddenREF certificate in its lovely frame. So we're very proud of it.
In addition to the workshop on roles in research, the participants also discussed other subjects, such as the types of research output and role categories, how to assess non-traditional output, and how to prepare for the next HiddenREF competition in 2024. Equally important, I would say, was also the fact that the event brought representatives from different institutions and roles together. I already mentioned publishers and funding bodies. In addition to that, the 90-odd participants also came from a wide range of backgrounds and research institutions. HiddenREF is a predominantly volunteer and grassroots-driven initiative. Its chair is Simon Hedrick, who many in the research software engineering community will know, and at the end of the festival I had the chance to talk to Simon about the day and what he thinks lies ahead for HiddenREF. Hi Simon.
Hello.
We're in the middle of the afternoon session at HiddenREF Festival. How's it going?
Really well. So it's been a fascinating to see how this really diverse group of people are all getting on together. We originally sort of planned to have various discussion sessions and lightning talks and all these other things. The thing that's been brilliant to watch has just been the breaks and the lunch and just how much networking is going on across these new contacts that are being made across these new roles.
Because this is the first festival of its kind, isn't it? The first competition was 2021 because of the pandemic.
Yes, it was a output of the pandemic. Everything was online. We had the competition originally, we thought this was going to be an in-person thing, and then the pandemic hit. That delayed our timelines a bit and meant that nobody could meet. In fact, one of the fun things that happened yesterday was the committee that has been working together for 3 years met for the first time in person. So that was it was really nice to actually see how tall people were. So we've never had a festival before where we've actually got people face to face. So this is the first time it's happening, and I doubt it's going to be the last.
The purpose of this festival, in fact, is to produce a white paper, isn't it? And because you're running another competition. It started with a competition in 2020/21, and it's going to be another competition next year then. So how does the white paper feed into that?
So the white paper's got a couple of roles, one of which is, there aren't many organisations that are bringing so many different viewpoints into this discussion about research assessment. So we're bringing lots of different communities that are largely unrepresented into this discussion and trying to understand, well, how do we recognise your work? So the white paper has this role of trying to, and this is a big ask, trying to bring together all of these different viewpoints and produce a coherent message that other people can pick up on and help with bedding into the academic community. Then the other aspect of it is just understanding some of the practicalities. So one of the big issues we have is, we go out and say, there are all these outputs that aren't being recognised, there are all these roles that are being overlooked. And of course, that argument's fairly easy to win. People say, yes, you should recognise this stuff. Now, how? That's the big problem. The white paper has a role. It's not going to answer those questions. It's far too early in the day for that. But it's got a role in starting to direct the conversation about how do we do this recognition. The way we want to do that is through the next HiddenREF competition, which takes place next year. And personally, I'm seeing it as a kind of feeder event for REF 2028. There's been some massive changes happening in REF 2028. I have to say that Research England are doing amazing work on the policy front on trying to represent the breadth of research that's out there. But making those changes actually bed into the universities, to the higher education institutes, is going to take a long time. What I want to do is use the HiddenREF as a sort of practice run. People can put in outputs that they wouldn't usually get into the REF. They can come across the kind of problems that they're going to come across when they try these non-traditional outputs, and they can work on knocking off the rough edges and then submit that to the REF 2028.
As we've heard from many people now, it doesn't seem to be so much the REF, because, as you say, Research England was actually here today in the person of Stephen Hill. It's the universities actually not submitting other stuff but publications. So how do you twist their arms?
That's the goal of the HiddenREF. The 2021 REF, that's the lowest amount of non-traditional publications that have ever been submitted to the REF or the research assessment exercise that came before it. It is a depressing statistic that it started off with a very small number of non-traditional outputs, and it's got smaller and smaller over each successive exercise. And as you said, Stephen Hill was here, Director of Research England, talking about their desire to get non-traditional outputs into the REF submission. The thing that needs to change is the fear of the unknown. Problem within the universities is they're not submitting these non-traditional outputs because they don't know what they are, they don't know how to judge their relative impact, and they don't know how to describe them, and they worry that if they were to put forward these non-traditional outputs, that other universities that put forward just publications are going to get the jump on them, basically, and ultimately it's a competition, the REF, because it's a competition and it's got a very big prize, it's got money at the end of it, and universities are motivated by money beyond all other things.
Unlike anybody else, of course.
Yes, absolutely.
REF, of course, the Research Excellence Framework, is a very UK-specific thing. But having people underrepresented in research, like, for instance, research of the engineers, and also technicians, librarians, and all the other people, is not a phenomenon exclusive to the UK. Do you see that the HiddenREF and what it tries to accomplish can be adopted or transferred over to other countries?
More than that, it's my hope that this happens, because, as you say, the problem is not specific to the UK, it's specific to any country with a research economy. So what we're trying to do is showcase it in the UK. Now, when we first started the competition, we did think, well, should this be a worldwide competition? Should we allow anybody to submit from any country? And the only reason we limited it to the UK is that this is a volunteer-run effort. So we wanted to focus on the UK to make the problem more tractable as well, because, as you've seen, looking at all the different types of outputs that can be submitted, it's difficult to understand how to work across those outputs, never mind understanding how to work across the outputs across other countries as well. But I can't see why we can't give people this format, package it all up, let them know how we do the assessment, let them know how we engage the community, and why can't we have a hidden... Well, it wouldn't be HiddenREF, though. This is an issue. We're going to have to change the name to something that's understandable. Hidden research, I think. Hidden research. But we could have hidden research Germany or US or any other country that was interested in investigating how to support their non-traditional outputs.
This being a voluntary organisation, as you just alluded to, what do you think the future of it is? How sustainable is it as being an entirely voluntary effort?
Being entirely voluntary effort, it's not sustainable. So there's only so long that you can run on other people's goodwill. But one of the things we're doing at the moment, and I can't go into the details, however, is there's been some positive noises about funding the HiddenREF, about funding a series of workshops that will help us delve a bit deeper into how do you assess these outputs, how do you work with these hidden roles, how do you support the REF in understanding how to do the assessment when we open up the assessment to all of these non-traditional outputs. All of that work hopefully will be supported very soon, and we're putting a bid in, and hopefully for the next 5 years will be supported. But we'll see. That'll take us beyond REF 2028, which would be enough time to be able to not only support people in the run-up to the REF, but also to assess what happened with the REF itself.
Finally, the 5% manifesto, which is that 5% of the output sent to the Research Excellence Framework for 2028 here in the UK. I mean, it's not beat about the bush. By non-traditional would mean non-publication based, right? I mean, that's
right.
How realistic do you think that's going to be?
One of the criticisms we had of the 5% manifesto was that's not very much. 5%, it's very small. It's double what is currently submitted. Currently, non-traditional outputs make up 2.4% of the REF, of the last REF. So it's double what's currently being submitted, and that's why we chose 5%. Personally, I feel it should be much higher. It should be 70%. It should be a significant majority of the outputs. However, we chose that 5% because we thought that was something that we could get HEIs on board with, so higher education institutes. And the idea is for them to sign up and then say that they will submit at least 5% of their outputs into these non-traditional, i.e. non-publication categories. And I feel that if you put that number up too high, then they'll just not think it's possible, and they'll probably be right. Our campaign is not going to take us up to 2028 and then everything will be sorted out by the REF 2028. This is a very long-running campaign. We're overturning hundreds of years of academic practice and changing academic culture, which is slow to change.
Indeed, large organisations change slowly, and not only in the UK. But change is happening, and we see that everywhere. Research today has long become a team effort where members from different backgrounds contribute to the success of a research project. And things like data software applications and other artifacts and media have become vital to research and science as well. Recognizing that is not only a question of a fairer evaluation, it's also vital for a sustainable research effort for the future. And I hope, therefore, that initiatives like the HiddenREF act as accelerators and perhaps even inspire other communities to lobby for change in their areas, as Simon already hinted. At the end of this episode, I would like to say a big thank you to the organizers and to the sponsors of this festival, and in particular to the team from F1000, who sponsored this episode. Oh, time's up. See you next time. But before I forget, this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons license. See ya!